Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I want to thank you all for joining in this live chat discussion and your interest in finding out more information about an ongoing clinical trial for persons with familial adenomatous polyposis. This is an opportunity for you to interact with the experts, including one of the participating clinical study investigators. Today's presenters include Dr. Travis Bray. He is a third-generation FAP previvor and understands firsthand the long-reaching physical and emotional effects living with FAP and what it has on both the patient and their family members. Travis received his PhD from Auburn University in 2008. He continued his research activities in actinide chemistry at the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory and also at the Argonne National Laboratory. In 2002, Dr. Bray stepped away from his career as a chemistry researcher to found the Hereditary Colon Cancer Foundation. Our other presenter this evening is Dr. Carol Burke. Dr. Burke is a diplomate in internal medicine and gastroenterology. Dr. Burke is the director of the Center for Colon Polyp and Cancer Prevention in the Department of Gastroenterology and Hepatology. Also head of the section of polyposis at the Sanford R. Weiss Center for Hereditary Colorectal Neoplasia at Cleveland Clinic in Ohio. Dr. Burke is a renowned expert in the field of hereditary colon cancers, including familial adenomatous polyposis. Dr. Burke is the author of numerous articles on the topics of colon cancer screening, prevention, and treatment. And Dr. Burke is also one of the clinical investigators for the CPP FAP 310 trial. Travis, over to you.
As Kathy said, I am the founder and currently the executive director of the Hereditary Colon Cancer Foundation. Shani and I started this a couple years ago in 2012. So I thought I would tell people a little bit about my family history. I am a previvor, so I have FAP. I'm a third-generation FAP. I don't want to say patient because right now I'm not in a hospital, but I'm the third generation of people born with FAP in my family. My father passed from FAP a few years ago, right before we started the foundation, and my grandfather passed when he was 36 years old. I have a surviving aunt, uncle, and cousin with FAP, and right now my aunt is the eldest person in the family with FAP and kind of the person we're rooting for to see how well our strain of FAP, how well we can handle it. So I have seen, when we started the foundation, we started it with some of the lessons learned from being raised in a family with FAP. So I've seen the effects that FAP can have on a family, the strains it can have on a family, the mental and physical and psychological effects it can have on the family. Specifically what I wanted to talk about in relation to the FAP 310 clinical trial is what I call my one real wish and my one true fear. I recently wrote a guest blog on Life's a Polyp about this, where you can read the full story. But the one real wish, as an FAP patient, so I'm a previvor. I had my colon removed when I was 15 years old, and so what that means for me is I have a J pouch. It was built to fill this cavity of a 15-year-old boy, and now I'm a 37-year-old man. And the one wish I would have had is for me to be able to extend into my early 20s before having to have my colectomy, having to have my prophylactic surgery, having to have my J pouch formed. And the one fear that I have presently at the age that I'm 37 years old is I've watched how people in my family have progressed into their 50s and the need for Whipples in my family. There's been 3 Whipples, my father, my uncle, and my cousin. Presently, myself and my aunt are Whipple free, but the having a Whipple is one of the things that really concerns me. And so why I personally support this trial, and this is Travis Bray saying this, why I personally support this trial is because I'm really interested in seeing a clinical trial that can stave off the formation of polyps or even reverse the formation of polyps and help other people who are in their late teens and adolescents live a little bit longer before needing a colectomy. And even though, and Carol and or Kathy can correct me on this if I'm wrong, there's no direct statement as to the efficacy of these drugs to prevent duodenal polyps, but I do hope that the same mechanisms apply for the colon and for the duodenum, and that patients who are at risk for duodenal polyps and needing a Whipple procedure, that it would potentially have an effect there. And then foundationally, we support any research that can create a better life for patients, and this we definitely have an interest in seeing this trial succeed, and appreciate what the researchers are doing and what Cancer Prevention Pharmaceuticals are doing. So I'll move on to the next slide. Carol, do you want to discuss what a clinical trial is?
Oh, sure.
Sorry, Dr. Burke.
Oh, no, that's okay. Carol is just fine. So a clinical trial is really a research study, and it's an investigation into an opportunity to prevent, detect, or treat disease. And we know that we're talking about FAP. And this trial really is looking at all of the potential areas within the gastrointestinal tract that may be affected with polyps or even cancer. And all clinical trials, really the goal is to test to see if treatment is primarily safe, but, right up there is efficacious, or that it's effective in, decreasing the disease state that we're working on. And I think that a lot of our patients that have participated in clinical trials, as Travis said, he's seen multiple generations with FAP. Many have been hit really hard with disease state. And I think my patients that have participated in trials, both children and adults, is it gives them hope. It lets them engage. It lets them feel as if they're doing something. They oftentimes get great care within the context of an environment of experts within a rare disease state. And, hopefully it improves the quality of their life. So even though it may not immediately know or show effectiveness or safety while you're in a trial, I think it does improve people's qualities of life because they feel more reassured. They feel they're part of something bigger, they're engaging, and they know that it may have some benefit for their family members, including their children and other generations. So, I think those are all the things that are important about a clinical trial. Travis, do you want to move on?
Yes. Well, that feeds very well into another point that I wanted to discuss, the benefits of participating in a clinical trial. And again, I'm speaking from the patient perspective. I'm speaking from also professionally from the foundation's perspective. When we talk to patients and discuss participating in a clinical trial, we have a few points that we discuss with them. Obviously you're going to have a connection to a specific disease, going through treatments, and the pluses and minuses that go along with that. You have to be vested and have some kind of connection to the disease, and I think that that's going to be true for the next 5 points. Whenever I spoke with my with family member, I recently spoke with a family member about joining a clinical trial, trying to dance around HIPAA here, but one of the points that was important for her was living in a remote rural area. She didn't have access to a specialist. This would be the one opportunity for her to visit a center of excellence, visit a high-risk cancer clinic, visit a team of people who are focusing their career on hereditary colon cancer. That really appealed to her. I have a friend with FAP, and her primary reason for joining clinical trials is because she wants to help improve the medical care of future generations. I kind of skipped one, but she wants to help improve the medical care of future generations. She told me she herself doesn't have children, doesn't intend to have children, and she doesn't consider herself a great advocate. She doesn't go online a whole lot. She feels like the way that she gives back to the community is by giving her body and giving herself to clinical trials, and she's been doing it for 30 years since one of the first Solendec trials. So that's how she, gives back to this community, along with accessing an expert care team, is the potential to receive effective care treatment from the specialist. So I've undergone a clinical trial myself. It was really great to have the access to Dr. Samada at the Huntsman Cancer Institute, and I'm leaving my own HIPAA rights here. But it was really great to be able to be under his care and work with Randy Burke's team. The next point is a little bit more cerebral. It's something that I care about, and I know the patients do. But with my background in science, promoting clinical trials and getting patients involved in clinical trials allows me access and allows them access to just pure basic science and science that is translational and can have a direct impact on the cells and patients. But then, to Dr. Burke's point, having an active role in their own care, there's so many patients that either just rely upon, I guess the best way, they feel like there's really nothing they can do between scoping or between treatments to better their care or to better their health. And being able to be a part of a clinical trial is a very active way that patients can be involved with their health care. So those are what we purport as the benefits for participating in the clinical trial. On the next slide, so we'll pass it back over to Dr. Burke.
Okay, so Henny Hassan is my trusted research coordinator, and we've been doing clinical trials in colon cancer prevention for, me 20 years and Henny for almost 25 years, even though she's younger than me. And being part of a study has its benefits, as Travis just mentioned, and I really believe in that. The young kids that are participating in trials sometimes are doing science fair projects because they're engaged, they're learning about disease state. We've had some that have become, gone to medical school and they're becoming, cancer scientists. So it's really exciting. But the other thing that's really important is involvement of a clinical trial is a big commitment on your part, and it's a huge commitment on our part. So we have an obligation to all of my study participants, all of my patients, but likewise, participating in a clinical trial just isn't signing on the dotted line, but you need to be willing to commit time and energy to taking study drugs. Sometimes these are long studies that can last 2 years in this case, or 5 years in other cases. How hard is it to remember even to take the antibiotic for your respiratory infection for 10 days, let alone taking a drug multiple times a day for a course of many years? Every time you have a cough, cold, stub your toe, go to the ER, take your Motrin or Advil. You have to remember, oh my gosh, my study coordinator is going to want to know every detail. When did I start? When did I stop? What did I take it for? What were the symptoms? And the side effects of medications. There are some anticipated potential side effects, like any medication that you can take over the counter or prescription. Some that we don't know. We don't know if the medications are going to be efficacious. So we know a lot about Sulindac. We know about Sulindac and DFMO in the sporadic population. We don't have the data of DFMO or the combination in patients with FAP, so we don't know if it's going to have a short-term effect, long-term effect, any effect at all, so that there's some unknowns. One of the participants on the trial said, I don't live near any study site, how can I be involved? And the study does require, as I said, time. not only to talk to the coordinator when needed and to come in for study visits, but it's also the procedures that you need to come in for, and we'll talk a little bit later about, how do you get to a study site, how long do you need to be there, and these aren't just an office visit lasts 15 minutes. Sometimes it's, a full day, and with travel from patients that aren't local, it could be a couple of days. And then, there's the cost of people missing work and, people going to a study site, and so different trials have different, financial arrangements of what types of things are covered, what type of things are not covered. So there are some costs associated in general with clinical trial, not just missing time with your family or time away from work or time away from school, but potentially there could be, other costs that may or may not be defrayed in certain trials. So those things are all spelled out, when you're interested in talking to the coordinator about your participation in a trial. And I'm sure there's many more that, that the people on the line can talk about too. And so I suspect that virtually everyone on the line is very familiar with FAP, but if there, are people who are maybe family members that are on the teleconference because they have, a loved one with FAP, let's just briefly talk about the disease state. It's a genetic condition, which can be an inherited condition, but 30% of the time, people didn't get it from their parent. It occurred when the egg and sperm united, so they're the first in the family that gets a condition. And then, of course, they potentially can pass that on to their children. The disease organ, which, really has been the kind of the mainstay of the treatment, has been the colon and the rectum, so colonic polyposis. And polyposis just means gobs and gobs of polyps. But like many people on the line, that it can have polyps in other places, particularly the duodenum, which are also adenomas that are precancerous, and duodenal cancer can be the second leading cause of cancer in FAP patients once the colon is removed. The stomach can also have gastric polyps, and traditionally we thought of those fundus gland polyps as nothing to worry about, but I've had some cases of people developing gastric cancer in the last 5 years or so, so that's an area that's starting to concern me. There's other places, including desmoids, fibrous tumors or sheets of kind of fibrous tissue within the abdomen, and then things that can be even outside of the intestinal tract or abdomen, like lipomas, fibromas, sebaceous cysts, pigment in the back of the eye, osteomas, extra teeth, thyroid nodules. But the ones that we're really concerned about within patients with FAP are the ones that can turn into cancer, and those are the adenomatous polyps that are seen in the duodenum, less likely other parts of the small bowel, and most commonly in the colon. And adenomas are the precancerous polyps that, if left in, have a variable rate to turn into cancer, and it's generally thought of that the majority of patients with FAP, if not, having their colon removed, would have virtually almost 100% risk of getting colon cancer by the age of 40. However, that's all old data, and we have patients that I'm managing in their 20s or 30s, and those of them with low polyp burdens, we're not seeing those rates of colon cancer, but certainly, in the old days, maybe when people weren't being screened, big polyps weren't being removed, there was a very high rate of colon cancer. Travis, do you want to go on? So let's talk a little bit about this particular study that Cancer Prevention Pharmaceuticals is making available. It's available worldwide. I'm one of the investigators, so, I need to say that that's a conflict because, my patients might feel they have an obligation to participate in a trial because I'm their doctor, but by no means should any patient feel like they need to be participate in a trial because their doctor is an investigator. I'd like to think I have my patient's best interest at the core of how I take care of them. And as Travis said, there are some benefits of participating in a trial, but, there is an inherent conflict of, I'm an investigator, I want to get patients into a trial, but there is this downside that sometimes you probably feel like you're a ticking time bomb where all you have is, your visits, and if there's nothing else that you can do to decrease your risk other than see your doctor, you might not feel comfortable. So I like to have the opportunity to offer trials to my patients so they feel like there is hope and there is, other progress being made that might be of benefit. So this particular trial is double-blind, randomized phase 3 trial of patients with FAP, and phase 3 trial just means that it's not looking necessarily only at safety. It's being done in humans, and Kathy can speak to it, but I think the whole premise of these human trials is really to try to get a potentially effective medication or medications FDA approved. And it's blinded, double-blind, which means I don't know what agent my patient is getting, and the patient doesn't know which study agent they're getting, and they're randomized to 3 treatment arms. And the 2 drugs that are being looked at within these 3 arms include eflornithine. It's also known as DFMO or CPP-1X. And this is an experimental drug, experimental in that it's an experiment. It's being studied within this disease state that's been shown to reduce the colorectal polyps in a different trial, but it hasn't been approved by the United States FDA, which is kind of the drug approval and regulatory agency, or the European Medicines Agency, EMA, for this particular indication. DFMO is available and approved for another indication. Sulindac is a really old anti-inflammatory medication, akin to, you can think of it like an ibuprofen, like a Motrin, like a naproxen, in that it has some of the same mechanisms of action by decreasing inflammation. But Sulindac actually has some other potential mechanisms of reducing polyp growth. And several studies have shown that Sulindac, especially in FAP patients, has been shown to decrease the growth of colon polyps or regress them. But again, Sulindac's been around since at least the 1980s, so 30, 40 years, and it was never studied in a large trial for FDA, by the FDA, so it doesn't have this indication by the FDA or the EMA for FAP. And then the third arm in the study, and I may be getting ahead of myself, is those 2 agents alone, or DFMO and Sulindac in combination, and other clinical trials have shown that those 2 drugs work together to reduce the number of colon polyps. And I have to say, in a sporadic colon polyp trial that's in kind of average risk people without FAP, a stunning reduction in colorectal polyps. So if you're interested in participating in the trial, you'll get one, you'll be in one of those arms, all that have an active agent. So the purpose of this trial is to determine if the combination of DFMO and Sulindac works better than either drug alone. And we're looking at many areas within the intestinal tract and FAP to see if there's improvement in the disease state. And also, part of the study is to look at if it changes the quality of your life, either positively or potentially, negatively. Travis? Okay, who is eligible? So, of course, you have to have FAP. If you haven't had your colon removed, but, the provider said, hey, listen, I think you need to see a surgeon to have your colon removed, so intact colon, and someone said, I think you need to talk about having surgery, or you have a lot of duodenal polyps that would make you stage 3 duodenal polyposis, so an advanced stage, or you've had your colon removed and have polyps in your rectum or in the pouch of a certain stage that your doctors are worried about. Yeah. So if you meet one of those requirements, you may be eligible. You have to have an APC gene mutation. If you haven't been previously tested, genetic testing will be done to confirm the mutation, and that mutation is required for participation in this study. and I know that can be a setback for some individuals because in a minority of individuals with FAP, we can't find the mutation in the family. The trial is also for adults, so if you're less than age 18, you can't participate. And there are some safety measures built in, so you wouldn't be eligible if you have a high risk of kind of cardiovascular disease, if you have hearing loss and wear a hearing aid, but if you don't have clinical hearing loss that that's affecting you, you could be in it. And of course, we're not interested in studying an agent that we don't know completely everything about its safety in a pregnant woman or you men or women that are nursing your babies. And I'm teasing about men nursing babies. Okay, so what to expect? Everything just went dark on my screen. I don't know if maybe is that my, Travis, is that you?
Move your cursor.
Okay, so now I see what to expect. So a 2-year trial, you'll get at least one active drug, 4 pills once a day, and you have to come into the clinic 6 times, and you come in for 3 visits to pick up study medication. Your coordinator will contact you between clinic visits. We always want to hear from you guys if there's something funny going on, and there's many ways that we communicate with our study participants. And so that is a close monitoring by the study team, but also the research team. And we see our monitors come quite frequently. We have teleconferences with other study sites and investigators and coordinators and the sponsors, so we all know, kind of what's going on throughout the world and our study participants and the study progress. Travis? Okay, so let's talk about some of the possible side effects. So for DFMO or eflornithine, the common ones, and those are ones in which if there was a clinical trial that when you talk to your coordinator or they query you, these would be something seen in greater than 10% of the population, and that would be gastrointestinal things, vomiting, diarrhea, nausea, and then rarely reported, that's less than 1% of the time, seizures, and the reported seizures were not by given an oral medication, but it was, and Kathy can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was used high dose IV, and then people that had, a potential break in the barrier between the blood flowing to the brain and the brain, so those kind of issues. Sulindac, it is an anti-inflammatory medication like ibuprofen, aspirin, Motrin, and so its most common side effects would be GI-related, abdominal pain, GI upset, rash, dizziness, headache. You'd think that headache would be decreased in the group on Sulindac. And then rare, less than 1% would be gastrointestinal bleeds, because it can, anti-inflammatory medications can have effect on inhibiting platelets, which are the blood elements that cause blood to stick together. So if they become less sticky, potentially if you had an ulcer or something else, you could bleed. And a very rare, less than 1% increased risk of heart attack and stroke. And, that data all came out in some of the other polyp prevention trials in sporadic individuals, like the Celebrex trials, of the IAX trials, Baxter trials, things like that. And that risk seems to be increased in the over-the-counter anti-inflammatories too. But again, those medications were approved so long ago, they will never be studied in the rigorous way that, that drugs are studied today. So, I think that cardiovascular side effects are underestimated with anti-inflammatory medications, and their risk really did come out, even though rare, in these clinical trials, particularly in polyp prevention. Travis? So someone asked about participating sites, and you can see that the sites that are up and running include East Coast, Midwest, kind of Southwest, Utah, so West Canada, there are European sites, and then there are more sites that are going to be opening, again, kind of southeast of the country, but also including, you can see the University of California at San Diego is going to be there, and there's going to be another site in the UK opening in England. So there's a variety of participating trial sites, probably one not far from you, and we can talk about if it's not so close, how can you become a participant in one of the trials. Okay, so I guess I can turn this over to Travis or Kathy, but you can see that we have contact numbers. Kathy Grenier is with Cancer Prevention Pharmaceuticals. Her phone number is there. The email for CPP is also listed. And just in general, it's a good idea for people with rare disorders or even maybe common ones to go on clinicaltrials.gov. Our trial is registered with our government, and you can find a lot of clinical trials ongoing for many disease states if you go on and search their website there.
All right, so I'll jump in there. That is the contact information for Kathy, and we'll take questions from the audience now. Again, I want to remind you to input your questions in the top bar. And while we take questions, I'll leave that screen up so people can continue to have the contact information. F. Blue asks, will the drug make me feel bad? Oh, I don't know.
So, am I muted or am I on?
You are on.
Okay. So I can only speak from personal experience. I can't tell you that any of my study participants have reported to me that study agent caused them to have. So we've had study patients that have had symptoms, a variety of different symptoms. One of my patients actually, had kind of a serious adverse event, and adverse events could be like minor adverse events. I had a headache or I had a cold. So I've had no patients that had something that was sustained that made them feel bad. Lots of my study patients have been on, some other agent in the past to control their polyps, like Sulindac or celecoxib. And I had one patient that had, a thrombosis or a clot in a blood vessel in an extremity. But we don't know if that's related necessarily to the drug or not. So I can only speak, we can only speak to the potential known side effects that we had on the slide there that reported uncommonly, which is seizures from the DFMO, and more commonly in the Sulindac and DFMO. But I haven't had any patients that actually say, I feel sick every day when I take it. It's not like taking chemotherapy. I think most of my patients are doing great and don't even think that there's any side effects related to the medication. But that's one thing that would be tracked in the study. If you feel bad, what is it? Is it nausea? Is it headache? Is it fatigue? And all of that stuff is, closely monitored.
Awesome. Well, I wanted to read two comments from the chat box just in case other participants see it. Erin M. Thinks this is the best clinical trial study and would highly recommend it. She also thanks Henny and Dr. Burke for all your hard work. I wanted to interject that. I had one question that I was curious about. You mentioned that there would be genetic testing involved if a patient hadn't already gone under genetic testing. Can you elaborate on that a little bit, what that would entail?
Sure. So genetic testing is the process in which a blood sample is drawn and sent to a commercial laboratory to identify the specific abnormality in the DNA, which is kind of your gene reading code. So that's what genetic testing is. It's drawing a blood sample, sending it to a lab, and getting the analysis of the specific mutation within your body that's causing FAP. And part of the beauty of participating in the study is if you haven't had genetic testing, you have genetic testing done, and then once we've identified the gene in you, then other of your at-risk family members who don't really know if they have FAP or not, let's say a kid who's young and hasn't had any endoscopic procedures yet, or maybe you have a sibling that said, oh, I'm never going to have a colonoscopy, maybe they'd be willing to undergo that. So once we've identified the gene in you, then potentially your family members don't have to have a colonoscopy to see if they're growing the polyps, because, if they're there and have a lot of them, they have FAP, but if they don't have any, you don't really know if they're, they haven't just manifested the polyps yet or not, so you still don't know their status. But if you have the genetic tests available, your relatives then could go to a commercial laboratory after seeing a genetic counselor and have their blood tested to find out if they have the gene and have FAP or they don't. And then there was another question, Travis, that you missed. I mean, I'm happy to, but it was from S. Blue, and that would be one for Kathy about he doesn't live in an area where he thinks there is a clinical trial. How does he get involved?
The best way to get involved is to go to the website page and log in and then request additional information. And then what we do is we will follow up with that individual and provide them with a number of the closest clinical trial sites where he could talk to the coordinator and or the investigator. And there is support for patients traveling distances because we know that not all patients with this indication live in these certain regions where we do have clinical sites. So the site will work with you to really assess and address how best that they can help you, find out if you are eligible and also, what's available to participate, especially if you are traveling a distance to one of the clinical sites.
Awesome. Shani put a couple of questions in here. I think it's a good clarification point. How can someone find out if they're eligible? And is there someone that they can talk to if they have more questions? In both instances, that would be contacting you, Kathy. Is that correct? Can they call, or they can call or go to the website?
That is correct. And then what we do is we actually connect that individual up with a particular clinical site, because it's the physicians that are participating in the study that really are the experts that can give these individuals some very good guidance and information. So we work on both sides to make sure that they get the information they need to find out more about the study, both from CPP, but also one of the clinical investigators and or their research coordinators.
Awesome. I want to thank Erin for her interaction with S. Blue about the potential malaise for the drug. Jeff had a question. Can he just call Henny to find out if he can participate? Can he bypass the whole CPP crew together and go straight into the Cleveland Clinic?
I'd like to say, of course.
And that would be my response as well. And I think if we need to provide him with that contact information, we will be happy to do that. Or if there is a way that he can get in direct contact with Dr. Burke or Henny, that is very appropriate as well. Because I think if you go to clinicaltrials.gov, there is a listing of the clinical sites, and in those clinical site listings, it actually has direct contact information for both the coordinator and the investigator. So you can always go that route to get the information on how to directly contact Henny or Dr. Burke.
Awesome. So, I mean, it seems like he's on a first-name basis with Henny, so it sounds like he's going to probably be calling her tomorrow. And then one last point, Zach also said that he is on the study and has not had any side effects. So patients echoing the provider's statement. So I think we are about 10 minutes beyond the half hour, which everyone seems to be fine with, but unless there's any other questions, I'll pass it back to Kathy.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Travis. I don't mean to interrupt, but I just want to say that Travis is an amazing guy. He has really created a wonderful organization with the Hereditary Colon Cancer Association. And if you guys are not involved, we would love motivated, smart people to be engaged with Travis and the organization, because it's only through you guys will we know how to best take care of you as time goes on. So, Travis, I'd just like to thank you for everything that you've done, and maybe you can plug the organization and try to get these wonderful patients involved, because they have lots of energy, they're bright, and they want to make a difference.
I also want to say a big thanks to Travis and as well Dr. Burke, because Travis has worked with us carefully and has supported us in many, many ways to make this successful. And as Dr. Burke said, this HCC Foundation is an incredible group of individuals that can provide you with lots of good help and support, and then to actually get involved with it, because both Travis and Shawnee have done a lot to, bring this orphan indication more to the forefront.
Well, thank you, both of you. Carol always flatters me, so I really appreciate it. I did throw up our website for the people that wanted to come by and check out the resources that we have available. HCC Takes Guts. It's a double entendre. Hereditary Colon Cancer Takes Guts. So that's hcctakesguts.org. We are in the midst of revamping the website, adding a bunch of new material to it. You can actually also find on our website a whole discussion about clinical trials. This is some language that I put together late last year. You can find out a lot more information about the FAP 310 trial. So there's a tremendous amount of information. We do elaborate from the foundation side, the potential benefits and risks. Considerations before participating. So there's a lot of information, and a lot of it was embedded in this presentation by Dr. Burke that you can check out. Shawnee wanted me to make sure everyone knows that this video will be available tomorrow. So if you want to share it with family members or with people within the community, we urge you to do so. There will also be a survey sent out. And I don't know that. Sorry. You will receive an email with the video embedded within it. So you'll have a lot of information coming your way. So with that,
and I would like to, on that, I think that really concludes this live chat and discussion. Again, I want to thank all of the participants who gave up their time tonight to participate in this discussion, as well as Dr. Bray and Dr. Burke. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.